Over the next month, it got worse. A $50 fine for leaving my trash bin out overnight. A $100 fine for unauthorized exterior lighting. A warning about noise disturbance when I had my son visiting for the weekend. I tried reasoning with them. I attended a board meeting. I showed receipts, permits, even the county's approval for my dock repairs. Karen looked me straight in the eye and said, "We appreciate your effort, but community harmony matters more than paperwork." That's when I knew logic didn't live here. The officer finally came back from inspecting my property. "Everything looks fine, sir. We're going to close this out as a misunderstanding." "Misunderstanding?" I repeated. "They called 911 and told you I was dangerous." He gave me a sympathetic look. "I get it, but there's no evidence of a crime and no one's hurt. Try to settle it peacefully." Karen stepped forward. "Officer, you're making a mistake. He's unpredictable. I'll be filing a formal complaint with the HOA board and the county." The officer gave her a tired look. "Ma'am, please don't misuse emergency lines for neighborhood disputes." She folded her arms, furious. "We'll see what the board says." When the police left, the silence that followed was heavy. I stood there in my driveway, watching the red taillights disappear, and I felt something change inside me. I wasn't scared anymore. I was angry. The next morning, I checked my mailbox and found another envelope. Notice of non-compliance. $500 fine for disturbance and unauthorized lighting. That was it. I wasn't going to be quiet anymore. Because what Karen didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I had cameras. Small, motion-activated cameras hidden on the corners of my house, facing the driveway, the dock, and the front gate. And they'd been recording for weeks. That evening, I pulled up the footage from the night before. At first, just darkness. Then headlights. Then 3 figures. Karen, Tom, Brian. Standing near my property line, pointing, taking photos. Then Karen pulled out her phone, turned toward my house, and made the call. Her exact words, "Yes, 911. We have a situation with a dangerous neighbor. He's yelling and waving tools around." I paused the video. There was no yelling, no tools. Just me, 30 feet away, tightening a bulb on my deck. They'd staged the entire thing. I printed the screenshots. I backed up the video. For the first time, I felt a sense of control. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about principle. If they could do this to me, they could do it to anyone. So I decided to fight back. Not with anger, not with shouting, with proof. The next morning, I wrote an email to the HOA board requesting an official hearing regarding harassment and misuse of authority. I attached the footage. I didn't know it then, but that email would start a war I never asked for. One that would uncover something much darker hiding behind HOA rules and lakefront smiles. They called 911 to silence me, but they forgot. I had evidence, and soon the whole neighborhood would see the truth. When you wake up the morning after the police have been at your house, everything feels different. The sunlight doesn't look the same. The quiet doesn't feel safe anymore. That morning, I made coffee, sat by the window, and watched Karen walk her dog right past my gate. She didn't look at me. She didn't need to. The smile on her face said everything. She thought she'd won. But she didn't know about the footage. Not yet. I opened my laptop and typed an email to the HOA board. This is a formal request for a board hearing to discuss repeated harassment, misuse of emergency services, and violation of homeowner rights. Evidence attached. I attached the video stills, Karen and her group standing near my property line, her hand holding the phone, my porch light in the background. Then I hit send. Within minutes, I got a reply. We will schedule a private meeting to review your claims. Attendance limited to board members and the involved homeowner. Thursday, 7 p.m., Community Hall. Private. That word told me everything. They didn't want witnesses. That afternoon, as I took out the trash, my next-door neighbor, Mrs. Delgado, waved from across the driveway. She was in her 60s, kind eyes, always brought pie to neighborhood events. "I heard about last night," she said quietly. "You okay?" "I'm fine. Did you see what happened?" She hesitated. "I saw the police cars. Karen was standing with them before they arrived. I didn't want to get involved." I understood. Nobody wanted to cross the HOA. She stepped closer, lowering her voice. "You're not the first, you know. They did this to the Hendersons last year. They sold their house a month later. Couldn't take it anymore." I felt a chill. What happened to them? They started asking questions about the HOA fees, where the money was going. Next thing you know, complaints started piling up against them. Noise violations, trash violations. Then that 911 call about a domestic argument that never happened. After that, they left. Her words hit me hard. This wasn't about rules. It was a pattern. When Thursday came, the air felt heavier than usual. The lake was calm, the sky turning orange over the water. I put on a plain shirt, printed copies of the video screenshots, and drove to the small building near the entrance of the community, the Lakeview Community Hall. There were 6 cars already parked outside. Karen's silver SUV was front and center. Inside, the board sat around a long wooden table. Karen at the head, Tom beside her, and 3 others, people I'd seen at barbecues, now with stiff faces and crossed arms. "Mr. Jacobs," Karen said, pretending to sound professional, "thank you for coming. Let's resolve this peacefully." "That's all I want. Peace." I placed my folder on the table. "You called 911 on me, accused me of threats, and fined me $500 for something that never happened. I have proof." "Proof?" she smirked. "Proof." I slid the printed screenshots across the table. "This is you, Tom, and Brian at my property line. Here's you making the call. There's no disturbance, no threat, no yelling. Just me changing a bulb." The room went quiet. Karen glanced at the papers, then pushed them back toward me. "Mr. Jacobs, we don't dispute that you were fixing a light. The issue is that you've been repeatedly non-compliant with HOA standards." "That's not the issue," I said firmly. "You lied to the police." "That's a serious accusation," she replied, her voice tightening. "Be careful what you claim." Tom leaned forward. "We all know you've been difficult, Frank. You don't attend meetings, you ignore letters. The community has to protect itself." I couldn't help but laugh. Protect itself from what? A porch light? "From hostility," he said. Karen folded her hands. "Let's stay calm. The board has already voted on disciplinary action. You'll receive notice by mail." "You already decided before hearing me?" No answer. That silence told me everything.
That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying the scene in my head, the smugness on their faces. Then around midnight, I got a message. It was from an anonymous Gmail account. "You didn't hear this from me, but check your mailbox in the morning. The HOA isn't what it seems." The next morning, I found a plain white envelope with no return address. Inside, a printed email chain between Karen and the HOA treasurer dated 2 weeks before the 911 call. It read, "We need to make an example of him. If we don't enforce control, others will follow. Call security, call police, whatever it takes." The treasurer replied, "Understood. I'll back you up." I stared at the paper for a long time. They weren't just abusing authority, they were planning it. I took the email to the county HOA oversight office. The clerk looked up after reading it. "This looks serious. We'll open a formal investigation." Finally, some hope. But hope doesn't last long when you're fighting power. 2 days later, I came home to find a bright orange notice taped to my door. "Pending lien for unpaid fines, $1,750. They'd added new fines overnight: disorderly conduct, property damage, non-cooperation. I felt sick. They were trying to take my home. That's when I made the call to a lawyer named Ellen Parker. Ellen was in her 50s, sharp eyes, calm voice. She'd dealt with HOA abuse cases before. After hearing my story, she leaned back and said, "You're not the first and you won't be the last. These small associations get away with more than most people realize. But if you have proof, video, emails, we can fight this." "I've got both," I said. She smiled. "Good. Then we start by freezing their ability to fine you further. I'll file for injunctive relief first thing Monday." For the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe. Word spread fast. By Wednesday, neighbors were stopping me on my morning walks. "Heard you're taking the board to court." Finally, someone's standing up to Karen. "Be careful, Frank. She knows people on the county zoning board." I didn't care anymore. I wasn't backing down. That evening, Mrs. Delgado knocked on my door again. She handed me a flash drive. "This was in my mailbox by mistake. It's addressed to you," she whispered. When I plugged it in, my heart skipped. Inside were video clips, security footage from the HOA's own community cameras. One of them showed Karen, Tom, and Brian walking into the HOA office after hours, unlocking the cabinet and removing files. Another showed them shredding documents labeled Maintenance Funds 2023.
She smiled. "Good. Then we start by freezing their ability to fine you further. I'll file for injunctive relief first thing Monday." For the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe. Word spread fast. By Wednesday, neighbors were stopping me on my morning walks. "Heard you're taking the board to court." Finally, someone's standing up to Karen. "Be careful, Frank. She knows people on the county zoning board." I didn't care anymore. I wasn't backing down. That evening, Mrs. Delgado knocked on my door again. She handed me a flash drive. "This was in my mailbox by mistake," she whispered. "It's addressed to you." When I plugged it in, my heart skipped. Inside were video clips, security footage from the HOA's own community cameras. One of them showed Karen, Tom, and Brian walking into the HOA office after hours, unlocking the cabinet and removing files. Another showed them shredding documents labeled Maintenance Funds 2023. It wasn't just harassment, it was corruption.
They'd been misusing homeowner funds, covering it up, and silencing anyone who asked questions. The Hendersons, the Jones family, even that couple who moved last fall, they all got violations after questioning budgets. Now I understood the pattern. Control through fear, silence through humiliation. The 911 call was just a tool, a weapon disguised as concern. Ellen filed the case, attaching my videos, emails, and the leaked footage as exhibits. Karen's side responded with arrogance, claiming I was vindictive and disruptive. But the more they fought, the more evidence surfaced. Neighbors began sending screenshots, letters, and photos, years of intimidation. One man even showed me his violation notice from last year for improper flag display. He'd flown the American flag on Memorial Day without written permission. By the time the hearing date arrived, the HOA's reputation was crumbling. The county scheduled a mediation meeting. I walked in with Ellen beside me, calm, confident. Karen was already there, her smile gone now. The mediator started. This hearing is to address the misuse of emergency services and alleged HOA misconduct. Ellen spoke first. We have video and written proof that the HOA board fabricated claims, misused funds, and intimidated multiple homeowners through false violations. Karen tried to interrupt. Those videos were obtained illegally. Ellen cut her off. All from publicly visible security cameras and private property devices, perfectly legal. Then she slid a printed email across the table. And this, Miss Whitmore, shows your signature authorizing a fake police report. The room went silent. Karen looked pale. Tom shifted uncomfortably. The treasurer looked down at the table. The mediator cleared his throat. Given this evidence, I'm recommending a full audit of HOA finances and a temporary suspension of the board. Karen's voice trembled. This is ridiculous. You can't just— We can, Ellen said, and we will. That was the moment the balance shifted. For the first time in months, I wasn't the one under the light. They were. When I stepped outside, the sky had turned gray. A soft wind came off the lake. For the first time, it felt like the place was breathing again. Neighbors were waiting outside, curious. What happened? Did they get suspended? I didn't give details. I just smiled and said, let's just say things are changing. That night, I sat on my deck, watching the reflection of my porch light on the water. The same light that started it all. They called 911 to scare me, but they forgot you can't silence the truth forever. I didn't know then that this was only the beginning, because corruption doesn't die quietly. It fights back.
For a few weeks, I thought it was over. The county had suspended the HOA board, the investigation was moving forward, the neighbors had started smiling again. It felt like sunlight after a long storm. But peace in places like this never lasts long. The people who lose power don't just walk away quietly. They find new ways to fight. It started small. My mailbox was left open one morning, letters scattered in the dirt. The next day, a deep scratch ran across the hood of my truck. At first, I thought it was random. But then came the flyers. Every mailbox on my street had one. Warning, unstable homeowner at 34 Lakeview Drive. Proceed with caution. No name, no signature. Just my address in bold black ink.
When I picked up the paper, I felt something between anger and disbelief. They were trying to destroy my name. The next HOA meeting, the temporary board chair, a mild man named Roger, assured me they were investigating. But the damage had already begun. Neighbors who used to wave stopped making eye contact. Parents pulled their kids away when I walked by. I wasn't the man who exposed corruption anymore. I was the unstable neighbor. That's how it works. When power can't win with fear, it wins with lies. One night, around 10 p.m., I saw lights near the community gate. Karen's silver SUV. Even though she was suspended, she was there, talking to someone. Brian, the security officer. I watched them through the blinds as they handed each other a folder. I took a photo from my window, zoomed in. The folder had one word written across the front: Jacobs. 2 days later, a letter arrived from the county office. Dear Mr. Jacobs, we received a report alleging verbal harassment of community staff on October 15th. Please be advised that repeated complaints may result in a restraining order. I sat there reading the letter over and over. October 15th. That was the night I'd been at home, alone, watching a baseball game. It was clear now. Karen wasn't done. She was filing false reports, trying to build a case against me. So I went back to Ellen, my lawyer. They're retaliating, I said, handing her the letter. She read it carefully. It's predictable. They're trying to pressure you into settling or dropping the complaint, but they're digging their own grave. What do? We watch and we record everything. A week later, it happened again. Late at night, around 11:30, I was in bed when I heard footsteps outside. Slow, deliberate. I grabbed my phone and opened the security app. There, a shadow moving near my truck. The person crouched, then stood up and walked away fast. The next morning, I found a fresh dent on the passenger door and a note tucked under the wiper. Sell your house while you can. I showed the footage to Ellen. She looked angry for the first time since I'd met her. This is harassment and intimidation. We'll take it to the sheriff directly. The sheriff's office opened a case, but they were cautious. We can't accuse anyone without solid proof, the deputy said. Do you have clear footage of their faces? The camera caught only the silhouette, but the outline was familiar. Broad shoulders, a limp on the right leg. It was Brian, the same man from the night of the 911 call. I upgraded every camera around my house the next day. If they wanted to play dirty, I'd be ready. The meeting that shouldn't have happened. One Friday afternoon, Mrs. Delgado knocked on my door again. They're meeting tonight, she whispered, at Karen's house, about you. But they're suspended. Doesn't matter. They're still pulling strings. I overheard them talking at the store. I thanked her and waited. That evening, I parked my truck a few houses down and walked quietly along the tree line. Karen's house was lit up. Through the window, I saw 5 people sitting around her dining room table. I recognized all of them. Board members who were supposed to be under review. Karen's voice was clear from even the distance.
We can't let him make us look like criminals. If we can't get him legally, we'll get him through property violation codes.
Tom's voice followed.
We'll get inspectors involved. He'll drown in paperwork.
They laughed. That video was the final piece I needed.
Ellen filed a motion for witness tampering and continued harassment. The county judge took it seriously. A hearing was scheduled. Meanwhile, I shared the new video with a local news reporter who had been covering HOA scandals in nearby towns. A week later, the headline hit.
Lakeview HOA faces allegations of retaliation and misuse of police reports. That's when everything exploded. Once the news broke, the silence in the neighborhood shattered. People started talking again, really talking. Old board members, former residents, even maintenance staff. Stories poured out. Fake fines, missing maintenance funds, intimidation letters, selective rule enforcement. Everyone had a story. They'd just been too afraid to tell it. Now they weren't. Ellen filed a class action claim on behalf of multiple homeowners. Suddenly, it wasn't just me versus the HOA. It was us versus them. The courtroom was packed during the first hearing. Karen sat 2 rows ahead, hair perfectly styled, hands shaking just enough to show she wasn't as calm as she wanted to appear. The judge addressed her directly. Mrs. Whitmore, multiple reports indicate deliberate misuse of authority and intimidation tactics. Do you deny these claims? She tried to speak, but Ellen interrupted with a stack of documents. Your Honor, these are HOA financial ledgers and communications that were deleted the day before the county audit, recovered from the association's backup server. Karen's face drained of color. Recovered? She whispered. Yes, recovered. Permanently. During cross-examination, one of the treasurers finally cracked. Karen told us to file the fines. She said if we didn't make an example of him, the whole neighborhood would stop listening. She said it was about control. The courtroom went dead silent. Karen buried her face in her hands. The judge sighed. This court will be recommending the dissolution of the current HOA board and referral for criminal investigation. When the hearing ended, I walked outside into the sunlight. Neighbors were waiting, clapping, some even hugging. Mrs. Delgado had tears in her eyes. You did it! You really did it! I smiled, exhausted but relieved. No, we did it. They can't bully people forever. But it wasn't over yet. A few days later, I received an envelope from the county office. Inside was a letter. Pending final audit results, you are hereby reinstated as a member in good standing. All fines are nullified. For the first time in months, I felt free. But there was something else in that envelope. A small folded note, handwritten. It read, "You're lucky this time, but the lake remembers." No signature, just that one line. For a moment, I felt that old chill again. But then I smiled, because I had cameras, I had evidence, and now the whole county was watching. When people ask me now what it's like to live under an HOA, I tell them the truth. It's not about lawns or lights, it's about control. And when control turns personal, it becomes dangerous. But standing up for yourself, even when it feels impossible, can change everything. Because sometimes all it takes is one person saying no more. They tried to destroy my name. They tried to take my home. But when you expose the truth, fear loses its power. The morning after the court hearing, the lake was quiet again. This time, it wasn't the heavy kind of quiet that comes from fear. It was peaceful. For the first time in months, I could hear the birds, the wind, the soft hum of the water against the dock. But even as I stood there, coffee in hand, I knew the fight wasn't over, because the real truth, the one behind the money, the meetings, the fear, still hadn't come out, and I could feel it, like a shadow under the surface. 2 weeks later, the county appointed a forensic auditor to go through every HOA financial record from the past 5 years. Ellen called me. "They're digging deep," she said. If what you told me about the shredded files is true, this is going to expose everything. How long will it take? A few weeks, maybe less, but once the numbers come out, there's no going back. I hung up and stared out at the lake. The reflection of my house shimmered across the water, calm, steady, but beneath it, I knew there were currents. One evening, as the sun was setting, I heard a knock on my door. When I opened it, Karen was standing there. She looked nothing like the woman who had once ruled every meeting. Her hair was undone, her voice softer, eyes tired. "Can I come in?" she asked quietly. For a second, I almost said no, but curiosity got the better of me. I nodded. 5 minutes. She stepped inside, looking around the living room like she was seeing it for the first time. "I wanted to explain," she said finally. "Things got out of hand." "Out of hand?" I said, trying not to laugh. "You called 911 on me. You tried to take my house." "I was under pressure," she said quickly. "The board, the developers, they wanted things a certain way. I was just trying to keep order." "Order?" I said. "By lying? By scaring people?" She looked down. "You don't understand. There was money involved." Those words hit like a punch. "Money?" She nodded. "The HOA wasn't just collecting dues. We were funneling maintenance contracts through a private company, my husband's company. They were supposed to handle landscaping, dock repairs, security upgrades, but most of the work was never done. We kept the contracts active to collect the payments." "You're telling me you embezzled from your own neighbors?" "It wasn't supposed to be like that," she said, voice trembling. "It started small. Then it got bigger. And when people started asking questions, we silenced them." I stared at her, speechless. "And you think telling me now changes anything?" "No," she said. "I just needed someone to hear it before the world does." She turned toward the door. "The audit's gonna find everything. I'm leaving town tomorrow. I wanted to tell you I'm sorry." Then she left. I stood there for a long time, the sound of her car fading down the road. Sorry. A single word, years too late. 3 days later, the county audit report was released. It was worse than anyone expected. Over $300,000 in misused funds, phantom contracts, duplicate invoices, payments made to companies owned by Karen's husband and her brother. The report spread through the town like wildfire. Local news stations picked it up. "Lakeview HOA corruption scandal. Board faces criminal charges." For the first time in years, people were talking freely. They weren't whispering anymore. Neighbors walked up to me at the grocery store, shaking my hand, thanking me. "You stood up for all of us, Frank. We should have spoken sooner. You saved this neighborhood." But the truth was, I hadn't saved anyone. I just stopped being afraid. The county froze all HOA accounts. Karen and Tom were both charged with fraud and falsifying financial records. Brian, the security officer, was under investigation for intimidation and property damage. The judge appointed a temporary management company to oversee the community until new elections could be held. When I got the notice in the mail, I just sat there, staring at it. All those nights of fear, all those fines, all those arguments, over, just like that. But victory doesn't feel like fireworks. It feels like silence. A long, deep breath after nearly drowning. A week later, I received a letter from the new management. Inside was a handwritten note from one of the new board members. "We reviewed your case. All fines and violations have been removed. Thank you for standing up when the rest of us couldn't." There was also a small envelope inside, a refund check. $2,150, every dollar I had ever paid in HOA fines. I folded the check carefully and tucked it into a drawer. Not because I needed the money, because it meant something. It meant that truth had finally won. But just when I thought it was over, fate had one last twist. A month later, I saw Karen again, in the parking lot of the grocery store. She was loading bags into the back of her car. For a moment, she looked up, and our eyes met. There was no hate left between us, no shouting, no fear, just two people standing on opposite sides of the same story. I walked over slowly. She didn't move. "You were right about one thing," I said quietly. "The lake remembers." She gave a faint, sad smile. "I lost everything, Frank." "No," I said, "you sold it for power." She didn't argue. She just closed the trunk and drove away. That was the last time I ever saw her. Today, the lake is different. The new board is transparent. Meetings are open. Rules are simple. People wave again. Kids play outside. Sometimes when I sit on my porch and watch the sunset, I think about how close I came to losing everything. Not just my home, but my peace. And I realize something I wish I'd known sooner. It's never just about the rules. It's about who gets to make them and who has the courage to say no. The 911 call was never about danger. It was about silence. It was about fear pretending to be authority. But fear only works when you give it permission. The moment you stop giving it power, it collapses. Karen learned that. The board learned that. And maybe someday, every HOA that crosses the line will learn it too. They built their power on fear. I built my peace on truth. And in the end, truth lasts longer.
Months passed. Winter settled softly around the lake. The air was cooler now, cleaner. Most mornings, mist hovered just above the water like a memory that refused to fade. I'd sit on the porch with a cup of coffee, watching the sun break through that haze, and I'd think about how much one year had changed everything. This house once felt like a trap. Now, it felt alive again. The county's audit had officially closed. Karen and Tom pled guilty to financial misconduct. They avoided jail time by repaying the stolen money and resigning from all community positions. Brian was fired. The new HOA board, led by Roger, invited every homeowner to a public town hall meeting. No closed doors, no intimidation, just neighbors talking like normal people again. I showed up, sat in the back, and listened. Roger opened the meeting with something that caught me off guard. "Before we begin, we need to acknowledge one person who reminded us that communities should serve the people, not control them. Frank Jacobs, thank you." The room filled with applause. I didn't stand, I just nodded, humbled. Because truth doesn't need applause, it just needs to be heard. The new rules. The new HOA charter was simple. 1. No fines without written evidence. 2. No rule changes without majority approval. 3. No private meetings, ever. It was printed, signed, and pinned on the notice board beside the lake. A few people joked that it should be called Frank's Law. I laughed,
But deep down, I was proud. That piece of paper meant that no one else would ever go through what I did. One morning, the county sheriff stopped by. He'd been one of the officers that night, the one who'd asked if I had weapons. He smiled, extending his hand. "Heard you finally got your justice." "Took a while, but yeah, we got there." He nodded. "You know, we get hundreds of 911 calls from HOA neighborhoods every year. Half of them are nonsense. But yours, it stuck with me. You look more shocked than anyone I've ever seen." "I was," I said. "You never expect the people who live next to you to treat you like a criminal." "Well," he said, adjusting his hat, "we're now the reason we take HOA calls more seriously. Every dispatcher in this county knows about Lakeview." For the first time, that felt like something good. A month later, Karen's old house went up for sale. The for sale sign stood crooked in the frozen ground. It sold fast. A young couple from out of town bought it, unaware of the history that came with it. One afternoon, I saw them moving in. They waved. I waved back. It felt strange seeing new faces where so much had happened. But maybe that's what healing looks like. New beginnings, built on old lessons. Then, one cold February morning, another envelope arrived. No return address. The handwriting was neat and familiar. I opened it slowly. "Frank, I've been living in another town, trying to start over. I don't expect forgiveness, but I wanted you to know something. You were right about the lake. It remembers. Every time I see water now, I think of that night. I thought power made me safe. I was wrong. It made me blind. I hope you finally found peace. I'm still looking for mine. Karen." I folded the letter and placed it in the same drawer as the refund check. Some stories don't need revenge. They just need closure. That evening, I stood on the dock and replaced the last old bulb on my deck light, the same one that started everything. When I flipped the switch, the soft golden light spread across the water. For months, I had hated that light. It had become a symbol of conflict. Now, it felt like freedom. I watched the reflection ripple across the lake and thought, this is how it should have been all along. People often ask me what I learned from it all, and I tell them 3 simple things. First, silence is the strongest weapon of control. If you stay quiet to keep the peace, you're not keeping peace, you're surrendering it. Second, power without accountability will always turn corrupt. It doesn't matter if it's a government, a company, or an HOA board. When rules stop serving people, people have to take them back. Third, fear only works when you believe it's bigger than truth. Once you speak up, fear shrinks every single time. If you're watching this and you've ever been bullied by your HOA, listen carefully. Don't let them scare you into silence. Document everything. Record, write, save, because truth is your best defense. And remember, those rules, those boards, those meetings, they only exist because of you. They work for the homeowners, not the other way around. I learned that the hard way, but maybe, just maybe, you don't have to. Today, I'm not the man I was before the 911 call. I still live by the lake,
still fix things myself, still watch the sunrise with coffee in hand. But I'm not afraid anymore. Not of phone calls, not of meetings, not of people who think they can own peace. Because peace isn't given, it's claimed. Then, one cold February morning, another envelope arrived. No return address. The handwriting was neat and familiar. I opened it slowly. Frank, I've been living in another town, trying to start over. I don't expect forgiveness, but I wanted you to know something. You were right about the lake. It remembers. Every time I see water now, I think of that night. I thought power made me safe. I was wrong. It made me blind. I hope you finally found peace. I'm still looking for mine. Karen. I folded the letter and placed it in the same drawer as the refund check. Some stories don't need revenge. They just need closure. That evening, I stood on the dock and replaced the last old bulb on my deck light, the same one that started everything. When I flipped the switch, the soft golden light spread across the water. For months, I'd hated that light. It had become a symbol of conflict. Now, it felt like freedom. I watched the reflection ripple across the lake and thought, this is how it should have been all along. People often ask me what I learned from it all, and I tell them 3 simple things. First, silence is the strongest weapon of control. If you stay quiet to keep the peace, you're not keeping peace, you're surrendering it. Second, power without accountability will always turn corrupt. It doesn't matter if it's a government, a company, or an HOA board. When rules stop serving people, people have to take them back. Third, fear only works when you believe it's bigger than truth. Once you speak up, fear shrinks, every single time.
The night it happened, the lake was quiet. Too quiet for what was about to come. I stood on my porch, barefoot, staring at the dark water that stretched out in front of my home. My home, the one I spent 30 years dreaming about, the one I thought I'd retire in. But that night, it didn't feel like home anymore. It felt like a crime scene waiting to happen. Because down the street, under the glow of the street lamp, 3 people were standing in a huddle. I knew who they were. Karen, the HOA president, Tom, her husband, and Brian, the so-called security officer of the Homeowners Association. Their voices carried across the lake road, sharp and deliberate. They weren't whispering. They wanted me to hear. He's doing it again. You can't ignore it this time, Karen. Call them. Just call. And then I saw it. The phone pressed to her ear. The words that still echo in my head. Yes, 911. I'd like to report a disturbance at 34 Lakeview Drive. For a moment, I just stood there, frozen. I couldn't believe it. They were calling 911 on me. Within minutes, I saw headlights bouncing off the trees. Red and blue lights flickered through the blinds. 2 police cars rolled up slow, gravel crunching under their tires. One of the officers stepped out, his flashlight immediately blinding me. "Sir, step back from the porch." My stomach twisted. "Officer, What's going on? He kept walking forward. We received a call about a domestic disturbance and possible threats made against neighbors. Are you the homeowner? Yes, I'm the homeowner. And no, there's no disturbance. I was on my porch fixing a light. Then I heard Karen's voice behind them. He's lying. He's been yelling and shining floodlights toward our house all week. He's harassing the neighborhood. I looked at her, disbelief boiling inside me. Floodlights? Harassment? I installed motion sensors because someone's been trespassing on my dock. The officer's flashlight moved between us. All right, let's calm down. I just need to get everyone's story. But Karen didn't stop talking. He's unstable. We filed multiple complaints. The HOA board's terrified of him. That last line hit me like a knife. Terrified of me? I spent my whole life trying not to be the kind of man people feared. I paid my dues, followed their rules, even when they were ridiculous. But that night, facts didn't matter. Only fear did. The officers separated us. One walked me toward the porch, another kept Karen back by the gate. The younger one asked me quietly, "Sir, have you had issues with the HOA before?" I gave a short laugh that didn't sound like laughter. Issues? You could say that. They fined me from a mailbox being 2 inches too tall. They measured my grass. They told me what color curtains I could use. I tried to ignore it. But this is insane. He nodded like he'd seen this before. Do you have any weapons inside the house? That question made my chest tighten. No, none. Would you mind if we take a quick look? You're welcome to look, but you won't find anything except tools and fishing rods. He hesitated. Sir, I'm going to be honest. People call 911 for a lot of strange HOA issues. But this one sounded serious. They said you threatened to take matters into your own hands. Did you ever say that? I sighed. I said I'd handle the trespassing myself by calling the sheriff if it happened again. He nodded slowly. That's not how she told it. Of course it wasn't. Karen never told anything the way it was. While the officers walked through my property, I caught a glimpse of something across the yard. Karen was smiling. Not a nervous smile, not an embarrassed one, a smile that said, "I got you." That was the moment I understood what this really was. This wasn't about lights or noise. This was about power. Karen had been president of the HOA for 7 years. She treated the neighborhood like her kingdom. She picked favorites, made rules on the fly, and punished anyone who didn't bend to her way. And I, unfortunately, had stopped bending. The trouble started 3 months earlier, the day I decided to rebuild my old dock. When I first bought this lake house, I thought I'd found heaven. A small wooden dock, a rowboat, quiet mornings with coffee. I'd worked hard all my life, and this place was my reward. Then one day, Karen appeared at my doorstep with a clipboard and a fake smile. "Hi, Mr. Jacobs. I'm just here to let you know that dock repairs require prior approval from the HOA board." "It's the same dock that's been here 20 years. I'm just replacing the rotten boards." "Still, any exterior modification falls under community regulation." I laughed politely, thinking it was no big deal. But a week later, I got a letter in the mail, a notice of violation for unapproved construction. That was the first fine, $150. I paid it just to end the nonsense, but it didn't end.